It was a 5-day march into history. The line of march, Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. The reason? Freedom. Freedom for the oppressed. The chains to be unshackled? Poll taxes. Unequal opportunity for Negroes. Police brutality. Murder. Years of Southern defiance of national law. A word in the heart of the Black Belt: inequality. Segregation. Call it what you will. A tense group of 3,200 persons began the march. March through that Black Belt from Selma, the seat of what Martin Luther King, the march's leader, called hatred, bigotry, and racism. But here, for the first time, was demonstrated in the navel of the previously impenetrable Southland a Negro and white combination, so strong, so united that courage could not be defied, not by violence or threats of intimidation. March 21st. Mark that day down well. This was their day. There was much to be gained here in Selma, Alabama. March 21st was important for a lot of reasons. Here was a chance for the dignity of man to be reestablished. Along a highway splashed with Alabama sun, jaded with hate mongers, bearing signs, reading the unspeakable, somehow the group of marchers, gathering force, seemed to be conveying something, national meaning, to something that was previously considered a local problem. At least that's the way one Alabama authority explained it in hushed tones the day the assemblage left Selma. Along the highway to history, along the way a reporter scurried to an aging courthouse and thumbed through books of history. And he had the sense of history, too. So did all engaged in that freedom march. They felt for sure that history was being made again. The reporter looked at the undisturbed court records, dusty and spiderwebbish, and saw the land deeds of Jeff Davis and other famous Southerners, and recalled his history. It was 100 years ago to the day, March 21st, 1865, that Lee's dwindling army, cut down by the course of war, was crumbling before Union forces, and a man stood lonely in the White House, perceiving the end of a great struggle that split a nation. A struggle which would lead to a surrender at Appomattox, and the end of a war among brothers. It was said 100 years ago to the day that the nation was united, that the Negro would be free. But long after the lonely man passed on, the nation still felt the chill of thraldom, and the slavery became a more subtle variety. The Bourbon South ruled supreme. The threat of violence, murder, was a staying force, and no Negro dared venture out into the Capitol grounds at Montgomery to tell a governor of his plight, at least until that day, along the highway to history. Second-class citizenship, wage bondage, segregated schools. At least no Negro alone would go there. But 100 years from the ending of the Civil War, the story is different. A nation was behind this movement to freedom. It all began in the mind of one Dr. Martin Luther King, and ended on the Capitol steps of Montgomery, Alabama, where a governor, huddled in his office with his aides, peeked out his window to see a massive throng in protest. And ironically, just across the street, stood the little church where Martin Luther King, the march's leader, preached those same ideas so long and hard. Yes, the stage was set for the dramatic moment of inspiring history. And this is the story of that march, the highway to history, a story which began with much preparation, grim preparation just in case. The president promised federal aid and protection, and it came to guide the marchers and protect them. But just in case.
The Medical Committee for Human Rights has organized this completely. We have one large mobile van which is completely equipped with beds, stretchers, an x-ray unit, and so on. This was loaned by the ILGWU. In addition to that, there are several other smaller mobile vans and ambulances, plus at least 10 other truck cars which are completely equipped with medical supplies. Last night we sorted the supplies, and each truck or car will have a complete set of medicines and so on, accompanied by a nurse and a doctor.
A doctor gives up time from his practice in New York to join and help in the line of march.
I'm an old Mississippi freedom fighter, and I've been down there in the wars. But I'm down here for the same reason that thousands of others are down here, all the priests, ministers, sisters, lay people, the people of goodwill who are interested in freedom for all Americans. And this is one way of fighting for it. And what we give up at home is very unimportant compared to what these people have been giving up here for 100 years. We hope that this will be the last major battle on this front. We hope that from now on freedom will come to all people. But if more battles are necessary, we'll be here with others too.
Wilson Baker is the public safety director of Selma. He's considered a moderate by most people down in Alabama, a police officer. He speaks his mind.
I don't know what to expect from this march. The only thing I can say, in the city, we don't expect any trouble. We expect them to get themselves assembled here and start moving as soon as they can, and we're going to do everything that we can possibly do as a law enforcement agency, working in cooperation with Alabama National Guardsmen that's brought into federal service. They're going to assist us with traffic to get these fellows across the bridge and on the way. I've been viewing it solely as a law enforcement officer trying to keep peace down here. And all of my actions and everything that we've been doing has been for one thing, and tried to maintain safety for these people and the people in our community.
Safety of the populace was his concern. And of course, he got help from the federal government. But what about the reason for the march? The reason was there. It was obvious. Could Alabama live with it?
The people in Selma have been living with the Negro population in Selma a long time, and we will continue to live with them. We'll pick up the pieces, and we'll try to live together friendly. We'll live together trying to help each other and trying to move the community along.
The guiding hand of Uncle Sam helped along the way. The Provost Marshal describes the preparation of the federal government in the march.
As Provost Marshal of the operation, what I'm going to do is try to expedite and promote safety and move this thing as efficiently as possible and control the traffic along the route.
Marchers, hundreds strong, gathered with hope and remembrance of things past in their minds. And the children joined in too.
Freedom! Freedom!
The children didn't seem to mind the festivities. Yes, it was to be 5-day, 54-mile journey. It was the end result of a project which started with the burning of an Alabama church, in which 5 Negro children were killed. But today, more children gave their reply. This was the home of rough Jim Clark, the sheriff, the white obstructionist. Martin Luther King wanted a march which would also symbolize the need for Negro voting rights, a bill to encourage Negroes to vote. It was all sponsored by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and it started the tide moving to get out the vote. But white anger burst out and was climaxed in the shooting of Jimmy Lee Jackson, a civil rights demonstrator. The march was first attempted in the beginning of March, but was broken up by police. And Boston Reverend James Reeb died from injuries received in an attack on him and 2 other members of the clergy in Selma. The nation regarded it as a national tragedy. A federal judge then enjoined Alabama from interfering with the protest, and the march was made ready another time. A man of God attempted to raise the national spirit.
Today we are engaged in a great struggle, not to test the endurance of our great nation, but to test whether or not a relatively small group of diabolical, murdering bigots hiding behind the facade of law enforcement can continue to slay, brutalize, and discriminate against our people in defiance of the laws of our nation.
Echoes felt over a nation. From New York, Detroit, Chicago, there was sympathy, there was participation. In Harlem, the Bishop Alvin Child's strong voice was added to that multitude.
Governor Wallace and the state of Alabama is at war with the United States government. Red China and the communist satellites are waging a cold war, but Wallace and his minions are waging a hot war, shedding the blood of American citizens with impunity. I call upon all men of goodwill from Maine to California to pick up the gauntlet that Wallace and the ruling clique of Alabama have flung in our faces and imposed the same embargo upon the state of Alabama as we would upon any other enemy of the United States. In the name of the over 500,000 citizens of Harlem community, I, as duly elected mayor of Harlem, call upon the chief executives, the governors of the remaining 49 states of the Union to institute and continue to maintain a perpetual campaign of moral, social, and economic pressure upon Governor Wallace of Alabama in order to expose, highlight, and bring to the understanding of the people of the free world that he is debauching the responsibilities of his sovereign authority and causing the American system of equal justice for all to be held as a mockery before the entire world.
And so at Brown Chapel in Selma, Alabama, the 3,200 gathered. Martin Luther King issued his instructions.
Now we're getting ready to go. Now it has been estimated that between here and the First Baptist Church and all around, we have almost 10,000 people who will be marching out of Selma today. Magnificent, and this is marvelous. Now our first stopping point will be, I think, about 7 or 8 miles out of the city where we will camp tonight. And now I present to you an able young man who has worked so well, my executive assistant, the Reverend Andrew Young, who will now get us in the position of the march and get us lined up so that we can move right out.
Now, if we can begin to get organized, we need to begin to get organized, and I think this will be your first test in how well you take instructions and how well we're going to organize this march. Now, I want everybody that's facing the platform to turn around and face the other way immediately. God bless you. Now, will everybody take about 20 steps in the direction you're going so that the steps in the sidewalk are as clear as possible? Start walking on the outer end, walking just on down between the houses.
As Martin Luther King and his friends leave the steps of the church, Reverend Young takes over. There was never a press briefing like this in history.
Just a minute, I'd like to identify the front line for the press. Bishop Millard of the Episcopal Diocese of Northern California. Mr. Lee, Mr. Cager Lee, the grandfather of Jimmy Jackson, who was killed in Marion. Mr. John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Deaconess Phyllis Edwards of San Francisco of the Roman Catholic Church, Episcopal Church. Ralph David Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Dr. King, Dr. Ralph Bunch, Rabbi Abraham Heschel, and Mr. Fred Reese, the chairman of the Dallas County Voters League. Now, we'd like to ask the press if you would move ahead far enough so that that we can get the march moving, and then we will stop and let you, we'll move on out of your way and let you get your pictures, but let's move on out of the way and let us get started.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Someday. Oh, yet in my heart I do believe. Oh, we shall overcome someday.
We are not afraid.
We are not afraid.
That march to freedom was a march into history. Arm in arm, hand in hand, they moved toward the state capitol.
Oh, deep in my heart,
We're going to organize the line.
we shall
Black and white together.